Hello, and welcome back to the third and final part in my series of videos breaking down and analyzing The Mandalorian. Before we get back into it though, one thing I want to mention was in episode 6, Rand tells Mando that Bill Burr is an ex-Imperial sharpshooter, and Mando says that's not saying much, and Bill Burr says, "I wasn't a stormtrooper, wise ass." This line is basically canonizing the fact that stormtroopers are incompetent, which just wasn't true in the original trilogy, but it's important for this show too. I'll talk about this more later, but in episode 8 we're told that the stormtroopers practically cleaned out the Mandalorians from their covert, so I'm not sure why they would try to tell us that the stormtroopers are inept. This was pointed out to me by a few commenters, and I just want to say thanks to them, as it's definitely something I should have touched on in the last video. But anyway, now that that's out of the way, let us begin. Episode 7 starts with Mando receiving a transmission from Greef. He says that things have changed since Mando was last there, and that the Imperial Guard has grown and completely taken over his city. He then says that Mando has been successful so far in staving off their hunters, but I thought Greef was the one who gave out the jobs. I'm not saying it's a contradiction because the Imperials could obviously hire their own bounty hunters, but it is a little strange. He goes on to say that he wants to make a deal with Mando, a deal where he brings Baby Yoda to the Imperials as bait so that they can kill the leader and take out the rest of the remaining soldiers. Greef says that if they are successful, then he can keep the child and clear his name in the guild, which this is fine, I guess. But it's just so obviously a trap. Like, Greef wants to get the Imperials out of his city, and we assume they're only there because they want Baby Yoda. Greef even says this. So Mando would know it too, but the plan is for him to bring Baby Yoda to the Imperials and then kill the leader. Then after that, he would have to try to kill every single guard, and then just pray that he didn't have connections to other Imperials that would likely come back for revenge. Now that plan seems pretty complicated, especially when you compare it to having Mando bring Baby Yoda directly to the Imperials and then just betray him. But Mando being dumb enough to fall for this trap is honestly just his character being consistent at this point. It doesn't make it any less annoying, but it is consistent at least. So after Mando gets this offer, he starts jamming buttons on his ship, making us think he's accepting the offer. But he's actually going back to the tribal planet from episode 4. And as he's landing, it cuts to Cara in a brawl with some alien man. The brawl goes on for a while, but there really isn't much to say about it. But after the fight, Mando asks if she's in need of some work, so it cuts to them having a drink together, and Mando tells Cara that the job seems like a straightforward operation, and that they're providing the plan and the firepower. Mando's just a snare, which, fuck me, I can't believe you're this dumb, man. However, Cara talks about how she has a few life sentences. She doesn't care about the money and she doesn't want to play soldier anymore. So it really doesn't make any sense that she would go with him for this job, right? Well, he says that they're not just local warlords, they're Imperial warlords. So she just looks at him and says, "I'm in." Okay? I guess none of the stuff she just said is relevant. I get it, she hates the Empire, but I thought that cleaning up ex-Imperial warlords was part of what she hated after the war had ended. But now she's willing to get life in prison to take out an ex-Imperial warlord? What the fuck? This absolutely reeks of writers who didn't do any kind of planning with their scripts, just writing them as they go. They used this as a way to make her seem disenfranchised with the Republic. But now they need her to go on this mission with Mando, so they just write her to feel the exact opposite way she felt before. Now that's a neat writing trick. We then cut to Mando and Cara on the ship, and they have a conversation about the nature of the mission. And they go to the lower floor of the ship, and Cara asks if Baby Yoda is okay all by himself, and oh man, if only she knew how reckless Mando was with him, this would be the least egregious thing he's done so far. But Cara asks Mando if he trusts the contact, and he says not particularly. So at least he is questioning the mission somewhat, but he does say that they will keep sending hunters and the kid won't be safe until the imp is dead, which I guess does explain why he's going on this mission, but it brings back an old criticism. Are these trackers really this powerful? There's really nowhere in the galaxy he could go to disappear? I'm nearly certain these trackers will never be explained, but they make me and I'm sure other viewers question so much shit, and it makes the galaxy feel so small. It's just too bad they didn't have one of these trackers in The Force Awakens, because if they did, the whole map finding thing would have to be cut out. Now the ship starts rumbling around and an alarm starts going off, and we find out that Baby Yoda is up in the cockpit fucking around with the controls. And I know it's dumb and it's just meant to be cute, but damn, this little baby isn't smart enough to realize that he's messing up a lot of stuff by messing with the controls. But he's able to focus his mind enough to lift a rhino into the air. This just seems interesting. But now we see Mando arrive at his next planet. And it's the planet where he found Baby Yoda, and he meets up with Quill. They both meet each other, and Quill recognizes Cara as a dropper from her tattoo, and we find out that Quill regrettably worked for the Empire. But after a little conversation, we see a droid walk into the hut, and it's IG-11? What the fuck? Isn't it dead? But then Quill says that it will not harm them. He says that he's not programmed to kill Baby Yoda anymore, and we get this long-ass montage of Quill finding and rehabilitating the droid. So after Mando left, Quill decided to go all the way back out to the camp of mercenaries to scavenge the remains, I guess, where he finds IG and decides to bring it back to his hut to repair it. This is just such a strange thing to have happen. It's definitely not impossible, just so strange. But yeah, now we have this montage of the droid relearning how to do everything. Seriously, what the fuck is happening here? How is this not something that's just done through programming? Quill makes it seem like this is some intensive process that you have to go through to make droids learn things, and that's just wild. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that it was shot in the head, but that doesn't seem right to me, because all the other droids we've seen were able to just be mass-produced, so we could assume they knew what to do as they came off the assembly line. So it must have just been coded into them, right? I mean, they're robots. But yeah, apparently we needed this whole montage of the droid going through rehab. So now Mando tells Quill about the job. He says he needs someone to protect the baby, and I kid you not, Quill says that he can reprogram the droid for nursing and protection protocol. It has gotten to the point where I'm pretty damn annoyed with this show. It not only contradicts things within the Star Wars universe, it not only contradicts explicit parts of the Star Wars saga, not only earlier episodes of this show, it's contradicting itself within episodes, and it's doing it at a breakneck pace. We got that montage of Quill teaching the droid everything manually less than 2 minutes ago, and now he's saying he can just reprogram it to do something else. Are you fucking kidding me? And don't tell me that he already taught it to care for the baby and all he has to do is flip a switch or something, because how in the fuck would he do that? It's not like he has a baby here to train it with. And why in the fuck would he do that? How would he know that Mando was gonna come back and need him to care for the baby? What is this bullshit? Oh, Mando says he doesn't want IG anywhere near the baby because it tried to kill him. And Quill says that the droid was programmed to kill him. Oh my god, what is this script? But he says that droids are not good or bad. They are a neutral reflection of those who imprint them, which this sentence is contradictory in itself. Is it programming or is it imprinting? You know, who knows? But I actually agree with the sentiment. Droids would just be tools for whoever is using them. They can be used for good or bad things, but saying that droids have no free will kind of shits all over this movie. Oh god, what a shit show this franchise has become. But Quill says they will come with them, only if IG comes too, and it's not for payment, but to keep the child from Imperial slavery. So after they leave, we see Mando and Cara arm wrestling, and during this, we see Baby Yoda reach out his hand. Cara starts choking, and we see Baby Yoda with this evil look on his face, gripping harder with the Force. What in the hell is going on here? They try to make it seem like Baby Yoda just wants to protect Mando from harm. And at first glance, this kinda makes sense, right? He used the Force to protect Mando from the Mudhorn, and he tried to use it against Zero in the last episode. But if you take a harder look at it, it really makes no sense at all. Baby Yoda has been around Cara for a good while. I mean, they spent weeks together in the village in episode 4, and in that same episode, Baby Yoda sees them full on brawling, and he didn't do anything then. But now, when they're fucking arm wrestling, not even fighting, he decides that he needs to choke the shit out of her? Are you serious? Baby Yoda has absolutely been around her long enough to know that she's not a threat, and it's not like she was attacking him or anything. It really feels like they just wanted to remind the audience that Baby Yoda is very strong with the Force because it may just be relevant later. Quill says that now the story of the Mudhorn makes more sense because he's heard rumors of this power, and Cara asks if he heard them while he worked for the Empire. And Quill claps back with "when I was sold into indentured servitude." But then Cara says something real fucking dumb. She says, "Yet somehow you walk free." What? She knows the Empire doesn't exist anymore, right? I mean, she was a member of the rebellion, so she must know. Because it doesn't take much more than basic human reasoning to realize that if you are a slave to a certain government, and that government dissolves, you're likely not going to be a slave to that government anymore. Or am I missing something here? So anyway, Mando and co. land on Navarro and meet up with Greef and some bounty hunters. They have a conversation and Greef asks Mando to leave Cara behind since she's an ex-rebel, but Mando insists that she's coming. So Greef agrees, but asks her to cover her tattoo because there's no need to flaunt it. But does he not realize that she has a face tattoo of the rebel symbol? This is what I was getting at when I said it seemed like there was no planning for this story. They want her to be able to hide the fact that she's an ex-rebel now, but they already gave her a face tattoo of the rebel symbol. After this conversation, they start hiking back to town, and they have to stop and camp out because for whatever reason, Mando parked his ship more than a day's hike away, but whatever. The show cuts to nighttime, and we see them all hanging out around a fire, and Mando asks Greef to go over the plan again, and all he says is that they both enter the common house, show them the bait, and then Mando kills them. Mando asks Greef to tell him about the reinforcements. He says they're all ex-Imperial, and once they realize their paycheck is gone, they'll all scatter. Mando then asks how many there will be, and Greef says no more than 4. What? Why such a small amount? The Imperial obviously knows that Mando took out like 10 stormtroopers on his own. So why would he only have 4 if Mando is coming back? And now that I'm on that, Mando should absolutely realize that these guys wouldn't trust him at all. They're obviously all very aware that Mando betrayed them last time, so why would Mando think they're not just gonna instantly try to kill him and take the kid themselves? I mean, they have enough troops with them to lock down a whole city, so what the fuck? This is all just so silly. But after this, Greef says nothing can go wrong, and just as he says that, a fucking pterodactyl swoops down and attacks him.
It's funny because they said one thing, but then the opposite thing happens!
They fly around for a while everyone is shooting at them, and one of the pterodactyls straight up picks up and flies off with a blurg. However, after the pterodactyls leave, Greef is left with a really deep gash on his forearm, and he's wincing in pain. The cut is really bad, especially since these pterodactyls apparently have, like, poisonous talons or something. So Greef is pretty much a goner. I mean, he survived getting shot in the chest through some pretty outrageous luck, but there's nothing that can save him now. But hold on, what is this? Baby Yoda is approaching him, and he's reaching out his hand to touch Greef, and oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Baby Yoda can use Force Heal. Oh, why? Why is Disney just so focused on making this universe so fundamentally broken? Let me be clear, I am completely fine with the Force healing power existing, but this power is so useful that you really have to make it something seriously challenging to unlock, and there really should be some kind of cost for using it. But when you make a fucking baby the first character we see on screen to use the power, you have just fundamentally broken the Force and opened up a gigantic amount of questions. Like how, in the thousands of years that the Jedi were in power and had tens of thousands of Jedi studying the Force, did no one unlock this power? And if it was because his race is super attuned to the Force or whatever, that would make it slightly more acceptable. But he's just a baby version of the Yoda who was the fucking leader of the fucking Jedi Order. Also, Rey can use it too, so that's just icing on the cake. God, this makes me so mad. The utter lack of respect Disney has for this universe is just baffling. And I honestly can't believe how much this has been glossed over when it comes to criticism for the show. But this moment might be the moment that finally killed Star Wars for me. With how much the magic system and universe has been undermined, without a full reset to pretty much everything Disney's done to this poor IP, I have a hard time believing I'll ever care about another Star Wars story. But we really need to get moving along because we've still got more to talk about. So after this move, it at least looks like Baby Yoda is struggling, but we don't know what happened to him because after this it just hard cuts back to them walking to the city. But when they get outside the city, we see the 2 bounty hunters pull their blasters on Mando and Cara from behind. And Greef, being the idiot that he is, turns around and shoots the 2 bounty hunters. Dude, these bounty hunters are your employees. They are loyal to you. Why not just tell them not to kill them? Even if you had to tell them in front of Mando and Cara, they're still gonna know about the betrayal if you just turn around and kill them in front of them. Seriously, why are you doing the things you're doing? So Greef tells Mando and Cara the plan, and from behind comes Quill. They didn't show him earlier because he would have been able to tell Mando and Cara about the hunters pulling their blasters on them, but I'm glad they remembered his existence. But Mando agrees with Greef that the only way Baby Yoda will ever be safe is if they take care of the Imperials, so whatever. They've got a new plan now. They're going to tell the Imperials that Mando had been captured and they're bringing him in. So I guess the bounty hunters didn't arrange this with the Imperials beforehand? I don't know, man. This is all just so confusing. But Mando tells Quill to take Baby Yoda back to the ship and seal themselves inside. And he says, and I quote, "When you're inside, engage ground security protocols. Nothing on this planet will breach those doors." Oh man. I wonder if that would have ever come in handy. I'm trying to think of some examples of when that new ability right there would have been useful, but I just can't. So they make it to the safe house, and immediately when they walk in, there are 4 stormtroopers just guarding the door. And Greef says at practically full volume, "You see? 4. Why would he say this so loudly, or at all? What are the stormtroopers supposed to think of this? Moving on though, we see the Imperial, and Grief says, "Look what I brought you, as promised." So this was set up with the Imperials now? What the fuck is going on? So the Imperial begins talking, and he goes on a long spiel about how the Empire improves all the planets within it, judged by any metric. Which is just hilarious now that we have episode 9 and we see old Palpy blowing up a planet for literally no reason at all. But whatever, this is obviously not something the audience was supposed to agree with. But I did kinda like it when I saw it. This is something I wish the sequels would have touched on. Give us some reason why people would want the Empire back. It might even help explain why nobody showed up to help at the end of The Last Jedi. At the end of his monologue, he asks to see the baby, and Grief says he can't because it's sleeping. He insists that they open it, but before anything happens, he gets a phone call, I guess. But he stands up and says, "Don't think me to be rude, but I must take this call." Man, this shit is so awkward. It's like the most cliche thing ever. While this is happening, Mando slips out of his handcuffs and gets his blaster back. And we see the Imperial getting a hologram from a new character, Moff Gideon. He asks if they brought the child, and the Imperial says they have, but Gideon says they should check again. Then a hail of blaster fire comes through the window, killing the Imperial and all the stormtroopers inside. But luckily, none of our heroes got harmed. After the gunfire starts, they start to run out from behind cover. And Kara has her light machine gun blastered now? When the fuck did she get this? Where was she hiding it? After that shit though, we get a shot outside to see a row of death troopers, who are the ones who just shot up the bar. God damn, I would love to sit down with the writers and just ask them what the hell is going on here. They're on the same team. Why did he kill all those stormtroopers just to try and kill Mando and co? Why on earth did he not just have the stormtroopers that were already in there do that? Why not just ambush them with a shitload of troops you already have? Why are you making this so much harder on yourself? He actually kills troops that he was in command of and were able to accomplish the same goal he is trying to accomplish right now. I know they wanted to show this man as being insanely ruthless, willing to kill his own men to accomplish his goal, but they only succeed in making him look utterly foolish. I hate to tell you this, but smart, methodical villains will beat out ruthless idiot villains every time when it comes to intimidation. This is why people love Tywin Lannister so much as a villain, because he knows what he's doing. He doesn't kill his own men just to prove a point to the other side. His actions make sense. It's also the reason people hated Hux so much in The Last Jedi. People do not like villains who have to impede themselves just to give the heroes a chance to win. But alright, let's move on. After 50 or so stormtroopers come piling into the area, Mando calls Quill and tells them to get back to the ship and bail because they're pinned down. The guard troopers intercept this on their radio and start speeding off to catch him. How do they know where the ship is, you might ask? Well, they just do, so don't ask that question. Now we see a TIE fighter swoop down and land in the wings. Oh my god. Oh, look at this. Oh, they fold. They fold. How cool is that? They fold. So after the ship lands, Moff Gideon gets out and calls out that they have something he wants. Then he starts his own monologue. During this, we get shots of Quill trying to get to the ship before the speeder bikes catch up to him. Yes, the ship that was a 2-day hike away from the city, he's made it back in like a few hours tops. And those speeders, maybe a few minutes. Alright then. But after a little back and forth, we see Baby Yoda lying on the ground and Quill dead. I'm assuming he didn't have any Beskar in his pockets and therefore is actually dead. Rest in peace, Quill. You shall be missed. But after that, it cuts to black and that ends episode 7. Wow. That was truly something special. I said before that episode 6 was the one that kind of killed my interest for the show, but I would say that this is the episode that killed my interest in Star Wars. The complete disrespect that Disney has shown for this universe has proven that nothing actually matters anymore. These writers are going to do whatever they want to tell their stories, regardless of what's come before, and this has just sapped the love I had for this franchise directly from my soul. But we're almost done, so now that episode 7 is ended, let's move on to the 8th and final episode. At the start of episode 8, we see the 2 stormtroopers that killed Quill on their way back on speeders. They stop outside the town and radio out to confirm them being allowed to come back into the city. But the operator tells them they should double check because the Moff just touched down and already killed a squad of local troopers. And the other trooper asks if he just said that Gideon killed his own men. And the other trooper says that these guys like to lay down the law when they first arrive into town. You know how it is. So I guess it's just common practice for these guys to take out squads of their own men the second they come into a new place. Wow, Such brilliance. Now we just have some comedic back and forth between the troopers that I actually did find genuinely funny. Until something happens. One of the troopers pulls out his pistol and begins trying to shoot at something on the ground. He misses like 3 times in a row, and the other stormtrooper pulls out his pistol and does the same. I get what they're trying to do here. They're trying to join in on the joke that stormtroopers have bad aim. The only thing is that we're supposed to fear stormtroopers. I know, crazy, right? But this is the second time in the show they've insulted stormtroopers for their aim just to make a joke. And it's really gonna sap a lot of the fear we're supposed to have for these guys, because it just turns them into buffoons. Now the trooper calls the operator again, and he says Gideon just killed an officer for interrupting him, so it might be a while. Man, Disney really wants to turn the Empire into a fucking cartoon. So while the troopers are talking, out of nowhere pops IG-11. How we got here without them noticing is beyond me, because if you look at this shot, there's nothing but barren wasteland behind them. I guess becoming friends with Mando just gives you the ability to teleport like he does. So IG walks up and tells the troopers to give back Baby Yoda, and they tell him he needs to get out of here. So he just beats the ever-living shit out of him. One minor thing I notice is that he grabs one trooper by the hand and breaks it and throws him, and the other trooper just stands there doing nothing until it's his turn to get beaten up. But then IG takes one of the speeders and rides off with Baby Yoda. After the title card, it cuts to Mando, Cara, and Greef still pinned down inside the bar. Mando asks if there's any other way out of here, and Greef says no. He then asks about the sewers, because if they can make it down to the sewers, the Mandalorians can help them escape. Now, the Imperials bring out a large laser minigun and start setting it up outside, but Mando says he's found the sewer vent. So they run over to a different part of the bar, and there's this big grate that apparently leads directly to the sewers. Why would there be a vent to the sewers in a bar?
Because I'm recycling the trash into heat for the bar and lots of smoke for the bar. I'm giving the bar the good smoky smell that we all like. The bar smells like trash.
But yeah, this invention is here just to let our heroes escape, so I guess we have to go with it. However, the vent has a grate on it that's not affected by blaster fire, and when asked, Mando says he's out of charges, even though we haven't seen him use one since he got here, but whatever. Now Gideon gives another monologue talking about how powerful the minigun that he just set up is. And he gives us Cara and Mando's full real names. How he has that information, I'm sure we'll never know. But we don't even know how he knows who's still left alive inside there. So Greef calls out to Gideon and asks what he proposes, and all he says is that he asks for their cooperation? He hasn't even told him what he's after. We assume it's Baby Yoda, but has no one told him yet that the troopers had captured him? And he already knows Baby Yoda isn't with them. We learned that from the hologram from earlier. So we get no specifics on what he really wants here. But he then gives them until nightfall to make a decision. Again, what the hell is he doing? Why give them more time to escape? You have the place entirely surrounded, and he's hindering himself again in order to give our heroes more opportunity to win. But after this, Mando says that he knows who it is, referring to Gideon. And Cara says that Gideon was executed for war crimes, but Mando says he remembers the voice from his childhood, and we get the same flashbacks from earlier in the season, albeit with more detail. This time we see the Mandalorian saving Mando from the battle droid that was about to kill him. He says after he swore into the creed, the only record of his full name was on Mandalore, and Gideon was an officer there when they took over, so that means it must be him? I guess this is fine. But Mando tries to call Quill again, but IG answers by saying that Quill is dead and that he has to fulfill his base function to nurse and protect Baby Yoda, which apparently means he's going to fly into the city on his speeder with Baby Yoda attached to his fucking chest. The travel times are not making any semblance of sense in these last 2 episodes, but he was flying full throttle after he snagged the speeder, and he was just outside of town. Why is he getting here now? And why is he doing it with Baby Yoda strapped to him? Why not take Baby Yoda back to the ship and then go to the town? It only took the troopers like a few minutes to get there. How is this nursing and protecting? God, what the fuck is happening? So now we get shots of IG just riding through the town at full speed. No hands on the bike, dual-wielding blaster pistols, and now I have to ask. Quill said he had to reteach IG everything from scratch, so did he teach him how to do this too? That dialogue just seems even dumber now. Now IG crashes into the giant squad of troopers, with Baby Yoda still strapped to his chest. Without cover, he's just slowly walking around mowing people down, doing a real great job of nursing and protecting, huh? I have to assume here that the only reason IG knows about the situation is from the Stormtroopers radio. They didn't show it obviously, but that's just what comes to mind first. So now we get a big gun battle where every important character forgets they can actually die. Of course, all the Stormtroopers are getting mowed down, but all the heroes just stand in the open, never using cover, and just get lucky enough to not get shot, I guess. But Mando spots the minigun that is fully mounted, and he just picks it up and starts firing it. We then see some of the stormtroopers walk up and breach the door to the bar. It cuts back to the fight in the courtyard, and we see Moff Gideon slowly walking out to shoot Mando. He of course isn't worried about cover at all during this, because none of these characters have any sense of self-preservation, but he shoots a generator box thing, I don't know. But it blows up Mando in a big fiery explosion, and what do you know? Mando is actually harmed by this. What a nice change of pace. But he's knocked out on the ground, so Kara runs over to pick him up, in full view of at least 15 or so stormtroopers, none of which even attempt to shoot at her. But really, who's even surprised at this point? After they make it back inside, Moff says burn them out, so he's sending a flame trooper in to light the whole place up. But why? He now knows Baby Yoda is in there 100%. And now is when he decides to burn the whole fucking place down? Are you kidding me? Please be smarter, I'm begging you. So now we find out the real reason IG came here. It's because he has a little welding device thing that can cut through the grate. Wow. How convenient. The writers needed a way to get them out of the bar, so IG pulls this dumb move that gets him and Baby Yoda trapped in here with him. And hey, what do you know? Now they have a way out. Neat. Now Mando is lying on the floor and telling Kara that he's not going to make it, and that they should just leave him. He tells her to take Baby Yoda to the Mandalorians, and they will help her. But she is adamant that she's not leaving him behind. But now we see the flame trooper coming up and just roasting the whole bar from the outside, because he just doesn't care whether or not the baby is alive now. Oh hey, another one of those mix-ups. Great. So now the flame trooper steps in the doorway to see everyone still alive, and he goes to roast them once and for all. But we see Baby Yoda step up and stop the fire with the Force, because of course he does, because why wouldn't he be able to do that? But this makes me wonder, why can't he just force heal Mando? Oh boy, I bet they're gonna regret giving him that power next season. It's gonna be real hard to watch if Mando is ever injured around Baby Yoda, because we're gonna always have to ask that question. But yeah, he stops the flames with the Force because nobody tried to gun this guy down when he just casually saunters into the doorway. But whatever. Baby Yoda now fires the flames back at him and passes out, and the grate is now opened. Mando tells everyone to leave him, and IG says he's going to stay. He tries to help Mando by taking off his helmet, but Mando points his gun at the droid and says he can't, because no living thing has seen him without his helmet since he joined the Mandalorians. And I don't know how you can't feel dumb saying that to a droid, but the droid has to tell him that he's not alive so he can see him, and it's chill, bro. So he takes off his helmet, and I just gotta say, what a harsh angle this is to view Pedro Pascal at. He's a really sexy man, but he's not here. But IG sprays him down with this magical heal spray, because of course he has that, and says he'll be healed in a matter of hours. Now they're walking through the sewers, and we don't see any of the Mandalorians from before. They wander through the tunnels for a little bit, and they see a pile of Mandalorian armor just on the floor. Mando starts yelling at Greef, asking if it was his bounty hunters who killed them all, but he denies it. And then we hear the voice of the armorer saying it wasn't his fault, because apparently after Mando left, the Imperials arrived and killed every single one of the Mandalorians, except this chick somehow. And I'm sorry, but I have a really hard time believing that all the mentally deficient stormtroopers we've seen so far were able to kill any of the Mandalorians, unless they had like thousands of them and this was all that was left. Because they're hunting them down in the sewers that they know far better than the Imperials, and they have blaster-proof armor. Please tell me how it's even slightly possible they were overrun, because literally all the armorer says is that the Imperials arrived and this is what resulted. Okay, cool. Perfect explanation. Mando then talks to the armorer about Baby Yoda, and he tells her that he can move objects with his mind. And she says that she's heard the songs of eons past, of Mandalore fighting a great war with an order of sorcerers called the Jedi. Disney. What the fuck are you doing? You know this is a galaxy that existed before you started making Star Wars stuff, right? The Jedi were the faction in power like 30 years ago. Why does everyone keep acting like they've never heard of them? Even Han Solo had heard of the Jedi in A New Hope. He just didn't believe in it. But this chick is acting like the last time the Jedi existed was eons ago. What are they trying to do here? Now the armorer says that Baby Yoda is a foundling, so by creed he must return it with its own kind. So Mando's gonna have to figure out where to take him. And I assume this is the setup for the plot of Season 2. But with the way this show handles plot, who knows what's gonna happen. After some conversation, the armorer gives Mando his Mudhorn signet, and we hear an explosion go off in the tunnel. And we see some stormtroopers running through to investigate. Now the armorer hands Mando his jetpack and tells him it will make him complete. She says that once he's healed, he will begin practicing with it, because it will not listen to his commands until he knows it. So it's gonna take some time before he's ready to use it, because it's clearly difficult and likely dangerous to use if you're inexperienced. She hands the jetpack to IG, because Mando is not even well enough to wear the jetpack, let alone use it. So now they're making their way out of the sewers and they reach the lava river, which very conveniently has a boat just sitting there waiting for them. They push the boat out on the river and we see one of the most unsettling things I've seen in a while. The pilot droid that was stuck under some rocks stands up and it's got human proportioned limbs. This is no count against the show, just strange to see, I guess. But after it stands up, Mando says, "I don't suppose anybody here speaks droid," while he's standing feet away from IG. Alright. Arriving at the end of the tunnel, Mando uses his thermal vision to spot the stormtroopers on the other side of the mouth of the tunnel. And funnily enough, the stormtroopers on the other side of the wall come up as the same color in his thermal vision as the lava does, which is odd. But now the plan is for IG to start a self-destruct sequence and go to the mouth of the tunnel and blow himself up in order to save the rest of them. And Mando actually seems upset that IG is going to have to die to save them, which I do like. This is some pretty cool character growth we're getting here. So IG gets out of the boat into the lava and starts walking towards the mouth of the tunnel. And when he gets there, we get a pretty badass death for IG. He self-destructs and gets rid of all the troopers that were waiting for him. I really like this sequence. We get some real development for Mando and a nice send-off for IG. After Mando and co leave the tunnel, we see Moff Gideon's TIE fighter come around a bend and try to attack him. Now I'm just confused again because I really thought he wanted Baby Yoda alive, or at the very least, he really wanted Baby Yoda's body, but he's firing big explosive blasts at them while they're floating in a river of lava. So if you do land any of these shots, what's your plan then? However, Mando says he's got a plan and he grabs his jetpack and puts it on. He uses it to jump over the TIE fighter and grapple onto it. And I guess this is fine. The armorer did make it seem like it was incredibly difficult to use, but he only uses it to blast off, so it could have been much worse. But now he's grappled onto this TIE fighter that seems to be flying extremely fast. He uses the hook to pull himself to the top of the TIE fighter and tries to shoot Gideon through the glass, but Gideon tries to shake him off. So Mando is holding on to one of the wings, I guess you could call it, of the TIE fighter while this thing is doing full barrel rolls at insanely high speeds. So your guess is as good as mine as to how he's still hanging on here. But alas, he is able to hang on long enough to plant some charges on the wings and he lets go. This causes the wing to blow off and this ship to crash. So rest in peace, Moff Gideon. You weren't a villain for a long time, but you can't expect to survive a crash like that, right? Mando then uses his jetpack to get a nice landing, which is whatever. I guess they're not actually hard to use. Mando asks if there's any more stormtroopers left over, and Cara says they think they cleaned up the whole town. So Cara says she wants to stay here, and Grief tells Mando that he would be welcomed back into the guild with open arms. But Mando has to take care of Baby Yoda and get him back to his own kind. So Mando says his goodbyes and turns around and just takes off on his jetpack. So why even have the armorer act like it's going to be tough for him to use? What was the point? He's already pretty fucking proficient with it. But now we cut to Mando back at his ship, and he had buried Quill and made a grave for him. Mando then takes off in his ship and flies off the planet, but the camera pans over to show Gideon's wrecked TIE fighter, and we get the Darksaber cutting through the ship to make a hole. Because Gideon apparently survived the crash without a fucking scratch. Okay. But yeah, he apparently has the Darksaber, which is something I'm sure most of general audiences didn't recognize. But in Clone Wars, we saw the Darksaber was an artifact once owned by the Mandalorians that was taken by Darth Maul. I assume the saber is going to be important later on, but for now, Gideon just climbs up on top of the TIE, with the saber still in hand, for literally no reason other than to give us this wicked cool shot of him. But yeah, he just stands there and then it cuts to black. And that ends Season 1. Whew, we made it. I know it's been a long journey to get here, but I appreciate all of you who made it this far. Okay, now that we're done with the analysis, I would like to give my conclusion on the quality of the show. But I'd like to talk about a few things first. I want to talk about what my purpose was behind making these videos. It has nothing to do with wanting to just hate on this show for the sake of hating on it, or just trying to tear it down just to tear it down. The reason behind it is quite the opposite. I love Star Wars, and the thing is, I want Star Wars to be better. Honestly, I miss being excited for new Star Wars content, and I'm not dumb. I know these videos aren't going to reach many people, let alone an actual creator at Lucasfilm, but the fact of the matter is, the more we praise content like this, giving it passes it doesn't deserve just because it's new or it made you feel like a kid again, the more we're going to be given content that completely disrespects the franchise. So my hope for these videos was to maybe point out to some people that the way you may have felt about the show the first time you watched it might not be accurate to what actually happened in the show. And that's really what I'm trying to get at here. When I uploaded my first video for this series, I got a few comments saying that The Mandalorian was the first thing from Disney that really felt like Star Wars to them, so me calling it bad or just criticizing it in general must be uncalled for. However, saying it feels like Star Wars doesn't serve as an argument for the quality of the show. All it tells us is how you specifically felt about it. So if someone were to respond with, well, it didn't feel like Star Wars to me, does the conversation just die there? Well, it doesn't have to. What you would do next is talk about why it made you feel those things. You would have to reference things that actually happen in the show to be able to explain yourself. And that's what these videos were for me. It's probably obvious by now, but I really don't like the show much anymore. The script is practically in shambles already, and there have only been 8 episodes. I would say this show suffers from a death by 1,000 cuts, but it really feels more like 997 cuts and about 3 giant gashes. The first giant problem with the show being Mando's complete character inconsistency. One of the very first things we see him doing is him letting one of his prisoners have free reign of his ship while he knows the prisoner has access to his gun cabinet. Then in that same episode, we're told he's the best bounty hunter in the parsec. We're told over and over how amazing of a bounty hunter he is, but he refuses to take cover. He seems to show a complete lack of awareness as to what equipment he actually has on him. And he just makes genuinely dumb decisions in general, which I feel like I've touched on enough in this series. The next one would be the extremely terrible pacing of the show's plot. When I say pacing, what I'm trying to get at is basically just the speed at which the story moves along. Like, we see Mando go from what I suppose they want us to believe is a hardened veteran bounty hunter into something of a father figure within the first 3 episodes. And then the story just grinds completely to a halt for the next 3. Episodes 4, 5, and 6 could legitimately be removed from the story and we would have missed out on practically nothing when it comes to development for anything. We would have missed how Mando met Cara, and that's about it. Episode 5 is probably the most egregious example of this. At the start of the episode, Mando's ship gets damaged and it's repaired by the end. We're introduced to Toro and he's dead by the end. We're introduced to the assassin and she's dead by the end. He lands on Tatooine and he leaves by the end. Nothing is accomplished in this episode story-wise, it's just filler. And this isn't to say filler is inherently bad. There are plenty of shows that have episodes that don't push the plot forward, but good writers will take that time to explore the characters and give us more insight into them. The example that comes to mind first would be the Tales of Ba Sing Se episode in Avatar: The Last Airbender. For those of you who haven't seen it, this episode is basically just a few self-contained stories, each focusing on a different character. This episode doesn't accomplish anything when it comes to the overall plot, but it does give us more reason to care about the characters and become more invested in the show. These 3 episodes don't give us anything like that. We really don't understand anything more about Mando by the end of them, and they come at the expense of cramming the whole Imperial plot into 5 30-minute episodes. And lastly would be the complete lack of respect Disney seems to have for the franchise. I won't talk about this one too much because I know most people aren't interested in it, but the writers at Lucasfilm really just seem to not be interested in keeping the Star Wars universe functional. The trackers are a really big one for me here, because they bring up so many questions about how they could possibly work in a way that makes sense in the context of the rest of the universe. Like, why do none of the military factions seem to have them? They're literally so overpowered. But I've talked about the trackers so much in this series that I don't really feel the need to go into them again. But on this same point, Baby Yoda. I will refrain from calling him a Mary Sue because there seems to be tons of different definitions for that label. But what I think most people wouldn't deny is that he is insanely overpowered. He uses powers never seen before in canon, force heal and the ability to block fire. He's more powerful than Luke was in Empire when it came to lifting objects. And I may have mentioned this at some point, but he's a baby. Oh. Alright, now with all that out of the way, if I was to give this show a number rating based just on how much I enjoyed it, I'd probably give it like a 5 out of 10. It was fairly average for me, but after going through all of this, I'd probably have to give it somewhere around a 2.5 out of 10. Hopefully I've provided enough evidence for this, but a show with this amount of issues makes it impossible for me to give it anything higher than that. But now we've come to the end of pretty much everything I wanted to say about this show. I'm glad you guys were able to make it this far, and hopefully that means you enjoyed what I had to say. If not, I apologize for that, and hopefully we could have a discussion about it down below. I really have no problem with responding to any comments you guys may have, so feel free to tell me what you think. So I guess I'll just say, thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you again next time.